beautiful form.
There's too much going on for me. I think they just speak about eyes. But one thing for sure, you don't see people standing around for no galaxy outside. You don't see anybody stand outside, spending the night outside for a galaxy.
True.
No comment.
Facts.
Okay. الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على أشرف الأنبياء والمرسلين وعلى آله وأصحابه أجمعين. الحمد لله حمدا كثيرا طيبا مباركا فيه كما يحب ربنا ويرضى. Oh Allah, we ask you for your guidance. Allahumma inna nas'aluka al-huda wa-tuqa wa-al-fafa wal-ghina. Oh Allah, we ask you for your guidance. We ask you for taqwa. We ask you for consciousness of you, fear of you. Wa-al-fafa, we ask you for chastity, wal-ghina, and we ask you for self-sufficiency. Tonight, inshallah ta'ala, we're going to talk a little bit about love. We're going to segue into that after we talk about what it means to be happy. Because love and happiness, right, not the song, but love and happiness are usually associated with one another, right? And I think it's important for us to understand, how to achieve happiness and what happiness actually is. I think, we don't have these discussions with ourselves in terms of challenging our thoughts, right? As a clinical counselor, I remember we used to teach what is called REBT, Rational Emotive Behavior Therapy. And this is where you teach people to challenge their thoughts. Why do you think like that? And I mean, alhamdulillah, although it's a clinical term, I think it has its relevance. It has its relevance. Happiness is a privilege. Let me say that first and foremost. Happiness is a privilege that is given to those brave souls who are wise enough to choose themselves and their happiness when they're caught in the crossroad between the happiness of others and their own happiness. And if you're bold enough to choose your own happiness at that time, then you deserve to be happy. A lot of times we get caught in a crossroad. As a fork in the road. You have to make a choice, either your happiness or somebody else's happiness. All right? I mean, throughout this talk, we're going to touch on some things that's going to make you challenge yourself. And that is my goal as a leader, as a speaker. My goal is to make you challenge yourself. And that's because that's what I do with myself. I'm not perfect. And I know that with my weaknesses, as long as I can turn my weaknesses into strengths, if I just recognize that they're weaknesses. If you recognize that it's a weakness, you can turn a weakness into a strength. Once you embrace that, you embrace the fact that it's a weakness. Just embrace it. It is what it is. Accept it for what it is, and then it becomes a strength. How does a weakness become a strength? Because once you recognize that it is your weakness, no one can use it against you. You know it's your weakness. You know that. But nobody else can use that against you because you've already accepted the fact that this is what it is. All right? It reminds me of something that happened in a movie some years ago, 8 Mile, right? You remember that movie 8 Mile with, what's his name? Eminem, right? And you remember, he had the stigma, the poor, white, trash type, live in a trailer or whatever the case may be. So when he got up to battle the guy, on, a rap battle, he began by stating all of the things that he knew his opponent was going to say about him. He said, you're probably going to say that I'm white, that I live in a trailer, that my mom is an alcoholic, blah, blah, blah. He started to mention all of his weaknesses. And then when he was done, he handed the guy the mic. The guy couldn't say anything, because his weaknesses had now become his strengths, because he had owned it. He had owned his own weaknesses. He had owned his weakness to the point that it became a strength for him. And so that's what I'm talking about. So happiness is a privilege that is given to those brave souls who are wise enough to choose themselves and wise enough to choose their own happiness when they're caught in the crossroad between their happiness and the happiness of someone else. If you are bold enough to choose your own happiness, then happiness is a privilege that you deserve. The Prophet ﷺ is the greatest example of this when he chose himself instead of his companions, whom he loved dearly. The Prophet ﷺ, there was nothing more beloved to him than being with his companions. You never saw the Prophet ﷺ by himself. He was always with Abu Bakr and Umar, always with this one or that one, always with his companions. So he had a genuine love for his people. He had a genuine love for them. However, when he was given a choice by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to either choose to remain in this dunya with his companions or to choose to be with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, what do you think he chose? He chose to be with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala because that was the thing that was going to make him more happy. Here again, when you're caught in a crossroad where you have to make a choice between your happiness or the happiness of someone else. Right? Many of us, we have committed ourselves to a lifelong misery simply because we have chosen other people's happiness over and over and over our own. And as a result of that, other people move on, taken from you while you're stuck, in a place where, scrambling, trying to get out of. Don't ever think that somebody cares about your happiness more than you. Nobody cares about your happiness more than you do, right? That's a point that I'm going to come back to, right? On the authority of Abu Sa'id al-Khudri radiyallahu ta'ala anhu, stay with me, right? Abu Sa'id al-Khudri radiyallahu ta'ala anhu is giving us, he's painting us a picture of an incident that happened during the time of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And I want you to, as you listen, imagine yourself sitting there while this situation is going on. Imagine you sitting in a khutbah of the Prophet ﷺ. The Prophet is a khatib, and you're sitting there watching him on the minbar, sitting there amongst the Sahaba, listening to him give an address. Right? So Abu Sa'id al-Khudri, he said, خطب رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم الناس. The Messenger of Allah صلى الله عليه وسلم, he addressed the people one day. And he said, إن الله خير عبد بين الدنيا وبين ما عند الله فاختار ذلك العبد ما عند الله فبكى أبو بكر رضي الله عنه بكاء شديدا. Abu Sa'id al-Khudri said that the Prophet ﷺ stood to give an address, to address the community. He said, and then he said very indirectly that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gave one of his servants a choice to choose to either remain in this dunya, in this world, or to choose to be with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, to depart from this world, leave this world, transition into the next dominion or the next, the next life as we know it, the life that is after this life. He said, فَاخْتَارَ ذَلِكَ الْعَبْدِ مَا عِنْدَ اللَّهِ. He said, and this servant that Allah gave this choice to, he chose to be with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. He chose to be with Allah. And when the Prophet ﷺ said that, Abu Bakr started crying. Abu Bakr is sitting in the crowd. No one knew what the Prophet ﷺ was referring to. And Abu Bakr out of nowhere begins to cry profusely. So much so that Abu Sa'id al-Khudri, he said, فَعَجَبْنَا لِبُكَائِهِ لَمَّا قَالَ النَّبِيُّ صلى الله عليه وسلم أَنَّ اللَّهَ خَيَّرَ عَبْدًا بين الدنيا وما بين ما عند الله. He said, so we were amazed at the crying of Abu Bakr. We were all sitting there. We all heard what the Prophet ﷺ said. And then out of nowhere, Abu Bakr starts to cry. In the middle of everyone, he starts to cry profusely. He said, فَعَجَبْنَا مِنْ لِبُكَائِهِ. So we were amazed at the crying of Abu Bakr. Like, what is he crying for? In one narration, Anas ibn Malik, he said, we said, Mali had the sheikh. What is wrong with this old man? Why is he crying? He said, فَكَانَ رَسُولُ اللَّهِ صَلَى اللَّهُ عَلَيْهِ وَسَلَّمْ هُوَ الْمُخَيَّرُ وَكَانَ أَبُو بَكْرَ هُوَ أَعْلَمُنَا. Abu Sa'id al-Khudri, he said, so we learned thereafter that the Messenger of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he was the servant that he was referring to in the example. He was the servant who was given the choice, and Abu Bakr radiallahu ta'ala anhu was the most knowledgeable from amongst us. Because no one knew the reference that the Prophet ﷺ was making. No one knew who the Prophet ﷺ was referring to, except Abu Bakr. Showing you that knowledge is not like having a whole bunch of narrations. Knowledge is learning to use wisdom, learning to use hikmah, acting upon the knowledge that you have. That's pure knowledge. That's true knowledge, right? As Imam Ahmed rahimahullah ta'ala, he said, ليس العلم بكثرة الرواية لكن العلم الخشية. Imam Ahmed rahimahullah ta'ala, he said that knowledge is not having a lot of narrations, knowing a lot of hadith. He said, but knowledge is khashya. Knowledge is fear of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, meaning that you act upon the little bit that you have. And this wasn't the first incident where Abu Bakr showed that he was more knowledgeable than the companions. See, we get caught up in these trivial arguments, who's more knowledgeable, who has the most knowledge. Not that it really matters, because everyone's knowledge at some point becomes relevant. Even someone who, is not a da'i or student of knowledge or whatever the case may be, he has worldly knowledge, sciences of the world he has knowledge of. That knowledge becomes relevant at some point. Every little bit of piece of information that everyone has that brings to the table, at some point it becomes relevant. Even information that you've known all your life, something about science or something that you've probably never known or never thought that it would have been relevant. And then somewhere along the line in your life, it comes a time when that question pops up and you say, wow, I know the answer to that. I never thought that knowing that years ago as a kid that it would ever be relevant, right? So it doesn't matter who's the most knowledgeable. Who's the most knowledgeable is irrelevant. It's irrelevant. But we get caught up in these trivial issues, who's the most knowledgeable, and we're calculating who's the most knowledgeable by what this person memorized, what this person knows, and how much this person memorized. So what? Abu Bakr radiallahu ta'ala anhu, he didn't memorize as much as Abu Hurairah. He didn't memorize as much as Anas. He didn't memorize as much as Abdullah bin Abbas, Abdullah bin Umar, Abdullah bin Amr bin al-As. He didn't memorize as much as any of them. However, when the Prophet ﷺ died, who was the one that grabbed the ummah by the reins and was able to redirect everyone? Abu Bakr as-Siddiq radiallahu ta'ala anhu. When he stood up and he said that whoever used to worship Muhammad, Muhammad is dead. And whoever worships Allah, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, hayyun la yamut. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is ever living and he never dies. And then he quoted an ayah. He pulled an ayat out of 6,000 and some odd ayats in the Quran. He pulled this one ayat out. That's ilm. That's knowledge of the religion. Having a whole bunch of ayats memorized, but you don't know where to use them, when to use them, when they become applicable, how to nastakhrij wa nastambit, how to make istinbat, how to utilize the verses, extract from the verses what is applicable to this issue or that issue. That is real knowledge of the deen. So a person who's memorized the whole Quran, like Umar, like many of the Sahaba who had memorized the whole Quran, they didn't know the ayat that was applicable to that situation right then and there, but Abu Bakr did. He pulled that ayat out of 6,000 some odd ayats in the Quran. He pulled that one ayat out, ma kana Muhammad, that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said, وَمَا مُحَمَّدٌ إِلَّا رَسُولٌ قَدْ خَلَتْ مِنْ قَبْلِهِ الرُّسُلُ قد خلت من قبله الرسل أفإن مات أو قتل انقلبتم على أعقابكم ومن ينقلب على عقبيه فلن يضر الله شيئا. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said that Muhammad is nothing more than a messenger. Many messengers have come before him. Many messengers have come before him. If he dies or is killed, are you going to turn back on your heels? And whoever turns back on their heels, they won't harm Allah in the least. So Abu Bakr was able to pull that one ayat out of all of the ayats in the Quran. He was able to pull that one ayat and apply it to that situation. That's ilm. That's ilm. So Abu Sa'id al-Khudri radiallahu ta'ala anhu, he said, so Abu Bakr was the most knowledgeable from amongst us. And the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, the servant that he was referring to in his example, he was that servant. Meaning Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gave the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam a choice. Think about this. If you were given that same choice, if you was given the choice right now, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said, you can leave this world, depart this world from this world right now, or you can stay with your family and remain with your family until your time comes. What would you choose? If you would choose, obviously most of us would probably choose to remain with our families. Those who say, I would choose right now to be with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, we talk a good one. But if the angel of death was staring you right in your face right now, and you turned around and the angel of death is standing right there saying, Akhriju anfusakum. As Allah says in the Quran, bring your souls to the forefront. Bring your soul here. Many of us would not be prepared at that moment. Nonetheless, if we were given a choice to choose to either be with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, to depart from this world and move on and transition into the next phase of our lives, or to remain with our families, most of us would choose to be with our families. And that's because we love our families, but we also love this world. And that's part of the problem. Because the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he said, "Man ahabba liqa Allah, ahabba Allahu liqa'ah." That whoever loves to meet Allah, Allah loves to meet him. But we haven't reached that level of love yet. We haven't reached that level where we believe or we interpret our happiness being connected to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, opposed to being connected to some material or some individual in this world. And that's part of our problem. That is part of the problem. The Prophet ﷺ, his love, his happiness was attached to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So when he was given the choice, he chose to be with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, to depart from this world. There was a time in our lives where, happiness was a given. As children, our responsibilities revolved around, matters that were infinitesimal, minute issues like doing homework and chores, that is, basically our responsibility as children. And then once we transitioned into adulthood, happiness, much like every other luxury afforded us in childhood, became a commodity that many of us would spend the rest of our lives chasing, sometimes at the expense of our own souls. Imam Ahmed rahimahullah ta'ala, he was asked, just giving you an idea of what we deal with on a day-to-day basis as adults. Imam Ahmed was asked, Kayf asbahta? How did you wake up this morning? And Imam Ahmed, he responded with the response of a man who is aware of all of the responsibilities on his shoulder. He said, Kayfa asbaha man rabbuhu yutalibuhu bi ada' al-fara'id. He said, how does any man wake up with a Lord that is requesting from him to establish his fara'id, his obligatory matters? He said, وَالنَّبِيُّهُ يُطَالِبُهُ بِأَدَاءِ السُّنَّةِ, and his prophet requesting from him to establish his sunnah. وَالْمَلَكَانِ يُطَالِبَانِهِ بِتَصْحِيحِ الْعَمَلِ, and the two angels on your right and your left are requesting from you to rectify your deeds before they jot it down. He said, وَالنَّفْسُهُ تُطَالِبُهُ بِهَوَى, and your soul or your lowly desires is calling you or requesting from you to follow its desires. وَإِبْلِيسُ يُطَالِبُهُ بِالْفَحْشَاءِ, and you have shaitan that is requesting from you to follow every sinful act. وَالْمَلَكُ الْمَوْتِ يُطَالِبُهُ بِقَبْضِ رُوحِهِ, and the angel of death waiting to snatch your soul. وَعِيَالُهُ يُطَالِبُونَهُ بِالنَّفَقَةِ, and your family requesting from you to provide for them. How does anyone wake up with those responsibilities on his shoulders? You have your family that is requesting for you to provide for them. You have shaitan that is requesting from you to follow every sinful act that he can beautify to you. You have your own desires that sometimes get the best of you, sometimes you get the best of it. As Sufyan al-Thawri rahimahullah ta'ala said, مَا عَلَجْتُ شَيْءٍ أَشَدَّ عَلَيَّ مِن نَفْسِي مَرَّةٍ لِي وَمَرَّةٍ عَلَيَّ, that I've never treated something that was more difficult for me than my own desires. Sometimes it gets the best of me and sometimes I get the best of it. Happens. So how does anyone wake up that has these, all of these responsibilities upon us? And some of us have been foolish enough to even place our happiness in the hands of other people. Place your happiness at the hands of the people. Meaning that you will only be happy so as long as this person is in your life. Or you're only happy so as long as this person is out of your life. That you've placed your happiness in the hands of someone else, being controlled by the presence or the absence of someone else who at very least should be a means to an end and not an end in and of itself. People come in and out of your life. All right, so if your happiness is contingent on the people that are in your life, then you're going to constantly find yourself frustrated and unhappy, disappointed, because people are going to come in and out of your life all the time, right? You ever see someone that when they're not in a relationship, they're the most miserable people, and in the moment they go into a relationship, they're all of a sudden happy. They're all of a sudden, learn how to be happy by yourself. Learn how to connect your happiness to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. We're connecting our happiness to the presence of other people, being controlled by the presence or absence of other people. When in fact, people should be a means to an end, not the end in and of itself. Ibn al-Qayyim rahimahullah ta'ala, he mentioned a very profound statement that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said, and this is known as a hadith al-Qudsi, or from the ahadith al-Isra'iliyat, the Jewish traditions, that the Prophet ﷺ told us, حَدِّثُوا عَنْ بَنِي إِسْرَائِيلَ وَلَا تُصَدِّقُوهُم وَلَا تُكَذِّبُوهُم. Narrate on the children of Israel, but don't believe them and don't deny them, because we don't know, it could be true and it could not be true. But narrate for the sake of narrating, and if in fact there's something in it that is consistent with our religion, then we know that it's actually the truth. But Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said, يَا ابْنَ آدَمْ خَلَقْتُكَ لِنَفْسِي. Pay attention to these words. So profound, man. A lot of times we read hadith and we say, wow, that's deep. But we never look at how, to go deeper than what we consider to be deep, right? We stay on the surface a lot, right? Because many of us can't swim. And as the scholars say, من لا يحسن السباحة يوشك أن يغرق. He who does not know how to swim will eventually drown. So many of us, we kind of stay on the surface because we can't swim. We stick our feet in the water, and I'm talking about the water of ilm, right? We stick our toe in the water, it's kind of cold. So, I'm just going to stay right here on the surface. We don't go any deeper than the surface. The Prophet ﷺ, he said that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said, Ya ibn Adam, khalaqtuka li nafsi. I created you for me. You belong to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. You do not belong to anyone else. No one owns you. Let me be clear about this. Nobody owns you. And why am I saying that? I'm putting extra emphasis on that today, because today, this environment that we are in right now, everything is a fight for your soul. Everything. When you go and sign up for a job, right? You fill out an application. That job now becomes your life. You eat, sleep, drink your job. And then when you quit, when you want to take your soul back, right? They blacklist you, right? So now you can't work at any more chains that are connected to this store. So if you quit Starbucks or you quit any other, company, Target, then they're going to blacklist you. So now you can't go to no other store that is affiliated with them and get hired simply because you quit, right? You took your soul back, right? And in the Muslim countries, and some countries like the UAE, they'll ban you from coming back to the country. Right? You quit, you resign, you cancel your contract. They'll deny you entry into their country because it's not a job. It's your soul that they're after. No one owns me. You don't own me. Right? In relationships, right? Relationships. I'm not even talking about marriages, right? Because marriage is a commitment. And there's some extra issues connected to that. That's a commitment. I'm talking about some people in boyfriend-girlfriend relationships. We're not even married. And when you decide this is not working for me anymore, I think this is where we should go our separate ways, like Musa and Khidr, هذا فراق بيني وبينك. This is where me and you separate, right? Spouse, the other person decides, I'm going to take your life, because if I can't have you, nobody can. Domestic situations where people murder other people when they decide, I don't want to be with you anymore. Why? Because now you're deciding to take your soul back. So now relationships are no longer, just these, commitments that we make to one another. Now it's your soul. Meaning the moment you try to exit this relationship, I'm going to kill you. I'm going to take your life. You don't own me. This is a relationship. And I'm not even talking about marriage. I'm talking about boyfriend and girlfriend. You didn't even put a ring on it. You didn't even make a commitment to this person. But yet you claiming this person's soul that if this person decides that they don't no longer want to be with you, you're going to take this person's life. This is where we are. We're talking about children, teenage kids killing each other over relationships. They're not even in committed relationships, marriages. These are boyfriend and girlfriend relationships. And if they don't kill you physically, they assassinate your character. They go online and post pictures that you shared with each other. You know, when you were intimate, when you had a relationship, they post pictures that, you know, subhanallah al-azim, you're going to assassinate my character because I don't want to be with you anymore. So I don't have a right to decide who I want to be with anymore. Because everything is a fight for your soul. Everything, even friendships. You can't, you know, you're on Facebook, you like this person's post and you don't like this person's post. You get a text from the person, well, you didn't like my post today. So obviously you got some issues with me. It's like, why do I have to have issues with you? I like this post. I didn't like your post. Okay. So now I can't choose whose post I want to like and whose post I don't want to like. Because it's a fight for your soul, man. Understand what's going on here. Understand, which is why when the Dajjal emerges, the Dajjal is coming after your soul. He wants you to worship him. Why will it be easy for people to just bow down and worship, you know, the Dajjal? Because we have already been accustomed to selling our souls to other things. We've already been accustomed to that. Musicians, actors, they sell their souls to be where they are. Selling their soul is not like you telling the soul, you know, as I'm signing the contract. No, it doesn't work like that. Selling your soul means, you know that this thing is wrong, but you're going to put aside your principles, your values, everything that you've learned along your life journey. You're going to put that to the side to achieve this temporary goal. That is the selling of your soul. We do it in relationships. We do it in friendships. We do it in, jobs, we do it wherever. Which is why when the Dajjal emerges, it will be very easy for him to tell a person, I'm God, prostrate to me, and people will fall prostrate to him because we have already been accustomed to selling our souls. The Dajjal will tell the heavens, withhold your rain. The Dajjal will tell the earth, withhold your fruits and your vegetables. And when the people see that, right, because we over-sensationalize everything now, right? Person get up and speak a little bit of Arabic, we hit the ceiling. Oh, mashallah, the brother's knowledgeable. Mashallah, the brother's this and he's that. And, mashallah, he just, teased you with a few Arabic words, what he knew in his vocabulary. And off we go, over sensationalizing the situation until, in a month or two, he's a great scholar, mashallah. Great scholar. And then we even have scholars endorsing stuff like that. We even have scholars endorsing stuff like that, right? Individual came to America, selling pizza and playing soccer and, can quote a few Arabic, phrases. And then he gets endorsed by a scholar saying that, he's a mountain of knowledge. What mountain of knowledge? Please tell me. What mountain of knowledge? Anyway, we're not ready to hear that. When you're ready to hear that, then I'll start calling out names. When we're ready to have that discussion, I'll throw the names on the table. We can have a discussion, but I don't think half of the ummah is really ready to have that discussion. Nonetheless, he said, Ya ibn Adam, khalaqtuka li nafsi. O child of Adam, I created you for me. قل إن صلاتي ونسكي ومحياي ومماتي لله رب العالمين لا شريك له. Say that indeed my salat, my prayer, my sacrifice, my life, my death is all for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. La sharika la. No partner in that. No partner in that. I belong to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. As a spouse, you don't own me. Husband, you don't own your wife. Wife, you don't own your husband. You don't own me. Brother wants to take another wife. She's ready to throw everything out the window. You don't own me. You don't own me. I belong to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. What do we say when death reaches us? Inna lillahi wa inna ilayhi raji'un. To Allah we belong, and to Allah we shall return. You don't own me. This is Tawhid. This is understanding Tawhid. Tawhid in practice. I'm always amazed at the abstract representation of Islam where people's theories are more practical than their practice. Amazed. Sit back and talk about theory all day long. When you look at the practical application of it, nothing. Faqid, ma shay. He said, وَخَلَقْتُ كُلَّ شَيْءٍ لَكَ. And I created everything for you. I created you for me, and I created everything for you. Everything Allah subjected to our use. Wallahi, understanding these two phrases puts your whole life in perspective. I created you for me, and I created everything for you. He said, فَبِحَقِّ عَلَيْكَ لَا تَشْتَغِلْ بِمَا خَلَقْتُهُ لَكَ أَمَّنْ خَلَقْتُكَ لَهُ. He says, so based upon my right over you, don't preoccupy yourself with the things that I created for you instead of the one whom I created you for. You get that? Powerful, man. SubhanAllah. These are concepts embedded in words. Concepts, if you just digest these things, Wallah al-Azim, it helps you to put your life in perspective. I'll be the first to say that I have a lot of enemies. Not a lot of enemies because I'm just not a likable person. But I don't let nobody control me. You don't control me. You don't control how I think. You don't control what I say. You don't control where I go. You don't control what I do. Not my wife, not my children, not my job, not nobody controls me. You are uncontrollable. Not controlled by debt, not controlled by sin, not controlled, none of it. You don't own me, you don't control me. And I can only function like that. I can't function no other way. This is Tawhid. In order for me to be a servant to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, I have to be free from everybody else. Everything, everybody else, I have to be free from them in order to be a slave to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. But you can't be two slaves at the same time. Allah gives the example in the Quran of a man who is a slave to many gods. Slave to many gods. And then there's one who's a slave to one God. هَلْ يَسْتَوِيَانِ مَثَلًا. Can these two examples be equal? أَفَلَا تَعْقِلُونَ. Don't you have any intellect? Don't you have any intellect? You have a man who's a slave to multiple gods. And then you have a person who's a slave, لِإِلَهٍ وَاحِدٍ, slave to one God. هَلْ يَسْتَوِيَانِ مَثَلًا. Can these two examples be equal? أَفَلَا تَعْقِلُونَ. Don't you have any intellect? It doesn't get any clearer than that. You can't be a slave to multiple entities. You can only be a slave to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. You can't be a slave to your desires. You can't be a slave to shaitan. You can't be a slave to your spouse. You can't be a slave to your job. You can't be a slave to debt. You can't be a slave. Why do you think we have all of these, haram and halal in our deen? All these things that are made haram so you can stay away from these things so that you avoid being slaves to those things. Riba, right? Interest makes you a slave to debt. An indentured servant. Indentured servitude, generational servitude, not just on you, but your children and your grandchildren become slaves to debt. Which is why Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in the Quran that if you do not give up ma baqiya min al-riba, what is left of your riba, of your interest, then take notice of harbun min Allahi wa rasuli. Take notice of war from Allah and His Messenger. Because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala doesn't like to be competed with. Right? In the Bible, the Christians, they have their tradition. God is a jealous God. That even applies in our religion. The Prophet ﷺ, one day, he said, as he was sitting with some of his companions, and one of his companions sighed, he said, Wallahi, if I saw a man walking down the street with my wife, I would hit him with the edge of my sword, not the flat part, the straight part, this part. Not like this, like this. Crack your wig wide open. If I saw a man walking with my wife, I would hit him with my sword like this, not like this. The Prophet ﷺ, he said, أَتَعْجَبُونَ مِنْ غِيرَةِ سَعَدٍ. Are you amazed at the jealousy of Sa'ad? He said, Wallahi, I'm even more jealous than him. He said, and Wallahi, Allah is more jealous than I am. So yes, that's part of our tradition too. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala does not like to be competed with. Which is why the Prophet ﷺ said that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said, من عمل عملا وأشرك فيه معي غيري تركته وشركه. That whoever does a righteous deed, does a deed, and he associates a partner in that deed along with me, I abandon him and his deed. Why? Because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala doesn't like to be competed with. Allah does not like to be competed with. So it's important for us to understand these concepts, man. These are not just hadith, these are not just ayats from the Quran. These are concept-based texts that have concepts embedded in them, that if you embrace these things, it makes you a threat no matter where you go. You're a threat. You are a threat. Right? A lot of, places that ask me to come speak, when I grab the microphone, they're holding their breath because they don't know what in the world I'm going to say. Because my speech is not scripted. Nothing I say is scripted. I stay within the limits that have been given to me by my religion, but no one restricts what I say. Nobody. And we pray that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala allows us to live by that and to understand that and to live by that. He said, but Ya ibn Adam, I created you for me. I created you for me. I belong to Allah. My sole purpose of being here is to serve Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Everything else is secondary. Everything else is secondary. Even when we get married, is to facilitate our servitude to Allah. Even when we have children, it's to facilitate our servitude to Allah. Right? Because when we have children, now we have an extra responsibility added to our plate, which makes it easier for us to get to Jannah. We get married, we have another responsibility added to our plate, which makes our path to get to Jannah even more. When you're single, your path to Jannah is very simple. You pray 5 times a day, you lower your gaze, you pray, you pray with the jama'ah. You have very simple tasks. When you get married, you have children, you have now expanded the means and the paths by way in which you can get to Jannah. Which is why Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in the Quran, that we will guide him to our paths. Subulana. Lanahdiyannahu subulana. We will guide him to our paths. Right? There's paths to get to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And these paths are represented by the good deeds that we have in our religion. But, anything that we use in our religion is just a means to the end. The end goal is to serve Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala until death comes to us. Allah says in the Quran, وَاعْبُدُ رَبَّكَ حَتَّى يَأْتِيَكَ الْيَقِينَ. Worship Allah until death comes to you. That is our life goal. Happiness is just a byproduct of the real goal. Happiness is not the goal. We're not seeking happiness. I just want to be happy. Serving Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will ensure your happiness. Serving Allah is the goal. Happiness is not the goal. If you make happiness your goal, you're going to spend your whole life frustrated. But if you make serving Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala your goal, happiness just comes with the territory. But some of us, he said, I created you for me and I created everything for you. So based upon my right over you, do not preoccupy yourself with the things that I created for you instead of the one whom I created you for. Some of us have even sacrificed our own happiness at the expense of making others happy, and have as a result committed ourselves to a lifetime of misery and self-resentment, which ultimately reduces us to bitter souls, bitter people who see no light at the end of the tunnel. Ibn Taymiyyah rahimahullah ta'ala, beautiful statement. And he's a man who died in prison, right? He said, "Ma yaf'alu bi a'da'i." He said, what can my enemies do to me? He said, "Inna jannati wa bustani fi qalbi." He said, my Jannah is in my heart. أينما ذهبت فهي معي. Anywhere I go, my Jannah is with me. You can't take that from me. You can put me in prison. You can shackle me up. Nothing you can do can take the Jannah out of my heart, meaning my iman, my faith in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. You can never take that away from me. I don't care what situation I find myself in. He said, فأينما ذهبت فهي معي. Anywhere I go, my Jannah is with me. He said, if they put me in prison, I'll make my prison cell a place of worship. He said, if they leave me, put me out of my land, I'll make it hijrah, migration for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. He said, and if they kill me, I die as a martyr. So what can they do to me? He said, well, in qataluni, aj'alahu shahada. He said, and if they kill me, then I die as a martyr. So what can they do to me? This is a man who understood that His happiness lies in his relationship with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, not in a relationship with anyone else. So our religion always teaches us to put Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala first, right? The Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he said, "لو كنت متخذا أحدا خليلا لاتخذت أبا بكر خليلا لكن الله اتخذني خليلا كما اتخذ إبراهيم خليلا فأكتفي بأخوة الإسلام ومودة." The Prophet ﷺ said that if I was going to take anyone to be a Khalil, an intimate friend, a close, intimate friend, I would have taken Abu Bakr as a close, intimate friend. He said, but Allah had already taken me as an intimate friend, just like He took Ibrahim as an intimate friend. So I suffice myself with the brotherhood of Islam and my love for him as my Muslim brother. That's it. Here again, putting Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala first. Putting Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala first. I love you, but I love Allah more. I love you, but I love Allah more. This would satisfy a lot of the arguments that go on between husband and wife. I love you, but I love Allah more. I love you, but I love Allah more. This ends all arguments. This ends all arguments. I love you, but I love Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala more. You want to just crack the door open and let some cold air come in? This will solve a lot of the arguments that go on. So here again, putting Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala first. The Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, "Man iltamasa ridha Allahi bi sakhati an-nas, kafahu Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala ma'unat an-nas." وَمَنْ الْتَمَسَ رِضَى النَّاسِ بِسَخَطِ اللَّهِ وَكَّلَهُ اللَّهُ إِلَى النَّاسِ. That whoever seeks to please Allah at the expense of angering other people, Allah will suffice him. You won't need the people. But whoever seeks to please the people at the expense of angering Allah, then Allah will leave you to the people. You have to fend for yourself. And because choosing someone else instead of yourself leaves you with an emotional deficit that you will spend the rest of your life trying to satisfy, there's no doubt that a truly happy life revolves around serving Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. As I said before, happiness is a byproduct of the real goal, and the real goal is to worship Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Happiness is not a goal, right? Some people say, I just want to get married so I can be happy. All right, and then when you get married and the person doesn't make you happy, you done with marriage, right? I don't want to get married anymore. Marriage is not all what it's cracked up to be. I tried that marriage thing before, and all of the other arguments we hear, these lame arguments that we hear people. Wallahi, I'm a defender of marriage. I think marriage is a beautiful institution if used right in the right way. I believe it is a beautiful institution, divine from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. But we use and abuse marriage and the institution of marriage for our own purposes, our own agenda, to satisfy the own emotional deficits and the own emotional voids that we have in our lives. And we're looking to bring somebody else into our life to fill that hole, right? Which is a rabbit hole that has no end at the end of the tunnel, right? And it's unfair. It's unfair that I got to come in your life and make you happy. You should have already been happy, and we could have just been two happy people together. Why do I have to come into your life and make you happy? So now you have expectations, which most of the time are not communicated at the very beginning, right? The woman or the man never says to the person on the other end of the table, I want you to make me happy, right? We just assume that you already know, right? Silent expectations is like a closed mouth. It doesn't get fed. Silent expectations don't get met, which is where your frustration comes from, because you had expectations that I was going to come in this marriage and end up happy, and you didn't end up happy. I'm a human being. I'm going to disappoint you. I disappoint my Lord every day. How you think I'm not going to disappoint you? I disappoint Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala every day when I sin. How you think I'm not going to disappoint you? I'm a human being. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala created us with these innate weaknesses. I'm going to disappoint you. So don't have no silent expectation from me that I'm going to make you happy. You should work on that on your own. Try to be happy on your own without me. Because at some point, I'm going to leave your life, or you're going to leave my life. Either because the relationship is not going to work, or because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala may call one of us back. Then what? And you have reduced yourself to a life of misery? simply because your happiness was contingent on another human being instead of on Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Allah says in the Quran, listen to this ayah very closely. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, "Man amila salihan min dhakarin aw untha wa huwa mu'min, falanuhyiyannahu hayatin tayyibah." That whoever does righteous deeds, whether male or female, while he is a believer, then we will give him a happy life. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala made happiness contingent on doing righteous deeds, serving him, instead of happiness being the goal itself. Happiness is a byproduct of the real goal, which is to serve Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And albeit sometimes in serving Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, you run into challenges, difficulties, hardships, right? But that does not infringe on your happiness. I'm happy that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gave me life. I'm happy that Allah chose me to be one of his servants. It's an honor. But whoever works righteous deeds, whether male or female, while they are a believer, then we will give them a happy life. So now let's talk about some of the things that infringe on our happiness. Some of the things that infringe on our happiness. Compromises our happiness. The first thing I want to look at is pessimism. And I'm slowly working myself out of the pessimism hole, because I was a bona fide pessimist for many years of my life. And pessimism, it comes from, it means that a person sees the world, views the world, or views people through the lens of a past horrible experience. So now that experience that the person had, that bad experience that the person had, they begin to see the world and the people in it through the lens of that experience. All right. So obviously, if you grew up in, horrible situations, it's really hard to see the world as a great place. It's really hard to see the world and all of its splendor and everything that is in it, and as vast as it is. It's hard to see the world as a good place when all of what you've known growing up as a kid has been nothing but horrible experiences. It's hard for you to believe that. So everything about you becomes pessimistic. You begin to see the world, you begin to see people, through this negative lens based upon some past horrible experience that you've had. However, the danger in being a pessimist is that you are the one that become the liability, not everybody else. It's not everybody else, right? The world doesn't revolve around the way that you view it, right? Just like as it is in the professional world, it doesn't matter who you know. What matters is who knows you. Who you know is irrelevant. Who knows you is what's more important. So how you view the world is not important. How the world, the reality of the world and what it is what really is important. All right? So pessimism, it has destroyed, right, many marriages. We say, I'm done with marriage, right? Because of some past bad marriage that you had, right? So now you judge all marriages. This is that bitter person that every time you're around, they're around people who have happy marriages. They always trying to, put your light out, throw some shade on your light, right? Because of their past experiences. It's like, y'all talking about all of that marriage stuff. Man, I'm done with marriage. Marriage is this or marriage is that. And it's like, how you going to judge everybody else's marriage because of some bad experience that you had? Most of the time because of what your own hands called for. Most of the time because of what your own hands called for. As we don't realize that a lot of the drama that comes into our lives, we open the door and welcome it in. But then we want to blame it on marriage. We want to blame it on God. We're looking for any external, right? Why? Because this is what is known as victimizing. When you victimize, that means that you always get to play the victim. It's always somebody else's fault, never your fault. So as long as you play the role of victim, you never have to confront the things that you did that contributed to the horrible experience you had. You never have to revisit that. You never have to look at the things that you did that brought about this situation, because you can always say it was his fault. It's his fault that the marriage didn't work. It's her fault that the marriage didn't work. They blame it on Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. They blame it on God. It's God's fault, right? So, it's important for us to understand, how pessimism, it destroys us. It destroys, any little bit of happiness that's out there for us. Pessimism will destroy that. And we don't realize that by being a pessimist, you now become the liability, not the people that you are pessimistic about. You now become the liability, because when you don't see good in people, right, then that means that you're not going to do any good for those people. The Prophet ﷺ said, "Man qala halaka an-nas, fahuwa ahlakahum." The Prophet ﷺ said, "He who says that there is no good in people, then he is the one that is no good in." Because now you become the liability. Because when you don't see good in people, then you're not going to do any good for those people, right? Hence the fact when a person says, "Oh, you're off it, you're astray, you're not Salafi, you're not this, you're not on the correct minhaj," whatever the case may be, you become so pessimistic about people, right? Even if I am off it, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, forgive us all. Even if I am off of it, does that mean that I'm going to die off of it? Does that mean that all the doors to Jannah is closed on me? That's it? Just throw the towel in, "Ughsil yadayk mink," wash your hands of the person, khalas, is it over with? Or should we see a person, even if we deem the person to be off it or stray or not on the right minhaj, that let me help the person, let me guide the person, let me direct the person to the right way in the best possible way that I can, right? But when you become pessimistic about people, you don't see any good in them. That means that you stop doing good for them. And as the saying goes, that we pay rent from living on this earth, and that is through servicing Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's creatures. You pay rent for living on Allah's earth by serving Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's creatures. We are public servants as Muslims. We are here to serve. That's our job. And you don't have a choice in that. When Yunus alayhi salam decided that he no longer wanted to serve the people, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala caused a well to swallow him and hold him in the bottom of the ocean until he realized La mafar min Allahi illa ilay, that there's no running from Allah except running to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. You don't run from that. You don't walk away from that. You just wash your hands of people and just say, there's no more good in the people. And it doesn't matter whether people are Muslim or non-Muslim. It doesn't matter. We are here to serve Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's creatures. And that is the way we pay rent for living on Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's earth. But the Prophet ﷺ said, "Man qala halaka an-nas, fahuwa ahlakahum." He who says that there is no good in people anymore, then he is the one that there is no good in. Why? Because his pessimism has compromised his ability to see good in people and has therefore rendered him a liability to the community. Right? We all say all the time, ain't no more good brothers out here. Right? Ain't no more good sisters out here. Right? You become pessimistic in your outlook. There was an incident that happened during the time of Umar ibn al-Khattab radiyallahu anhu, where a man was having an argument with another man and he had his camel on his property. So the man told him, "Remove your camel from my property." The man refused. So the man picked up a rock and threw it at him, and it hit him in his head and killed him. He died. So the two sons of the slain grabbed the man and dragged him to Umar ibn Khattab radiyallahu anhu. Umar, when he saw the scene, he said, "Why are you dragging this man?" They said, "This man killed our father." Right? So Umar asked the man, "Did you kill their father? Qatalta abahum? Did you kill their father?" And the man said, "Yes." And Umar radiyallahu anhu said, وَفِيهِ قِصَاص. In this is restorative justice. I have to restore justice, meaning a life for a life. So the man said, "Mahlan ya Amirul Mu'mineen." Give me some time, O leader of the believers. Let me go home to my family and let me explain to them what's about to happen and let me rectify my situation before you take my life. Umar radiyallahu anhu said, "No way. I'm going to let you go. And you're not going to come back? No way. And this man's blood is just going to be left, unsatisfied? No way." He said, "The only way that I'll let you go is if someone sponsors you. Meaning, if you go and you don't come back, then I kill them in your place." So Umar began to look around. No one wanted to sponsor the man. Until Abu Darda radiyallahu anhu raised his hand and said, "Ya Umar, ana akthuru. I'll sponsor him." Umar looked at Abu Darda and said, you know what you're doing, right? Meaning, if he doesn't come back, I'm going to take your life. This man's blood is valuable, and it's not going to just go away like that without it being satisfied. So Abu Darda said, I understand. Umar said to the man who killed the other man, I give you 3 days. Go back to your family. Let them know that your life is going to be taken. Think about this. Go back, straighten that out with your family, and then come back. 3 days. On the 3rd day, all the way up to the last hour, the believers begin to gather around. Abu Darda sitting there sweating. No sign of the man. This is the 3rd day up to the last minute. And then out of nowhere, the man comes. And Umar shocked that the man came back. So Umar asked him, why did you come back? You could have left and never came back. Why did you come back? And the man said to Umar, كرهت أن يقال ليس هناك أمانة في الناس. He said, I hated for people to say that there's no more trustworthiness amongst the people. I didn't want people to think that there was no more trustworthiness amongst the people. So I came back. And that is because the Prophet ﷺ said, أول ما يرفع من هذه الأمة الأمانة وآخر ما يرفع الصلاة. The first thing that will be lifted from this ummah, right, will be taken away from this ummah is trustworthiness, al-amana. حتى لا تكاد تجد يعني أمينا, until you will be hard pressed to find a Muslim who's trustworthy. First thing to be lifted from this ummah is trustworthiness, right? Where people don't trust one another anymore. Muslims who don't trust one another, right? And Masjid Taqwa, Imam Siraj's masjid in Brooklyn, New York, the sadaqah box is bolted to the floor. Sadaqah box. Bolted to the floor. And it was actually removed from the floor. I think a couple years ago, someone tried to steal the whole sadaqah box. Bolted. This is a Muslim establishment, masjid. Muslims frequent the masjid. Sadaqah box bolted to the floor. I remember being in Medina, and one of the scholars, without mentioning his name, he said one of the signs that we don't fear Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is that we have security guards at the haram. He said one of the safest places in the world, wallah, he started crying. He said the safest place in the world, which is the haram of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in Mecca, and we have security guards around the haram. And I mean, just last week, someone from Iran fired a missile 65 kilometers from the Kaaba. 65 kilometers from the Kaaba, Saudi Arabia was able to intercept the missile. Fired a missile from Iran into Saudi Arabia. Subhanallah al-Azim. Landed, it was intercepted 65 kilometers from the Kaaba. Just last week. Nonetheless, when you become pessimistic, when you get to the point where you don't see good in anything or anyone, if you allow shaitan to play with this long enough, you will eventually not see good in yourself. This is what leads to suicide. This is what leads people to take their own lives, where they begin to think, why should I live anymore? There's no more good in me. Nobody loves me. Nobody cares about me, right? Why should I even live anymore? Right? This is, you open the door for shaitan to play with that. So it's very important for us to, combat these thoughts that we have and not allow shaitan an entry to play with us. In addition to pessimism, one of the things that infringes on our happiness is anxiety. Anxiety, which is a fear of something, a fear about a future that hasn't actually happened yet. You're in fear of something that hasn't happened yet. Anxiety is so rampant amongst us today as Americans, right? And I attribute a lot of that to the technology that we have. Why? Because with the modern technologies that we have, it has given us a godlike status where we believe that we can control everything with the click of a button. That's what technology has done for us. So now we walk around like gods with these iPhones and Samsung phones, right? We're like gods. We can manipulate the whole world around us through the push of a button on a cell phone, right? I can log on to, the internet, and I can become whoever I want to become. I can change this. I can change the face of that. I can make a deposit into someone else's account in another country. I can make a business deal while I'm on, traveling on a plane, right? You can even use Wi-Fi on the plane now, right? You're thousands of feet in the air, and you can use Wi-Fi. You can log on and make a business deal while you're flying on a plane. This stuff makes you feel like God, right? You can manipulate and control all of the things around you. But then there's another element to life that we don't think about. And that is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's power and wisdom in everything that takes place. So we constantly find ourselves frustrated when, we click a button and things don't go the way that we want, right? You land in another country, you go and you buy all of the stuff in the store, you get to the counter and you swipe your card and the bank done put a lock on your card, right? Because they noticed some, purchases that look strange, right? Strange purchases, right? So now it puts a stop to your godlike status because you can't just manipulate it now. Now you got to wait until the bank opens, and you got to call the bank, and you got to make sure that they understand that you're in another country, and and straighten everything out. So now the human element kicks in, right? The human element kicks in. You're no longer God, right? So it's important for us to understand how these modern technologies affect us. It begins to manipulate our minds into thinking that we now have control. As Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala told the Sahaba, وَيَدُ اللَّهِ فَوْقَ أَيْدِيهِمْ, and the hand of Allah was over their hands. This is when they were given bay'ah to the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said that his hand, meaning Allah was the one that was in control of everything. They were giving bay'ah, they were giving their pledge of allegiance to the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. However, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala was in control of the whole situation. Allah is in control of the whole situation. So many of us are suffering from anxiety today, which is a fear about a future that hasn't happened yet, that we think is going to infringe on some current happiness that we have. We're currently happy, and we're in fear of something in the future that is going to infringe on our current happiness. The Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, listen to this very carefully. The Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he said, "Man asbaha minkum aminan fi sirbihi, mu'afan fi jasadihi, wa indahu quta yawmihi, faka'annama hizat lahu ad-dunya." The Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, whoever from amongst you wakes up aminan fi sirbihi, yani fi ahlihi, that whoever wakes up from amongst you in the morning and your family, your property is still intact. You open the bedroom to your children's room and you see your son, your daughter, your sons sleeping, everybody's still awake, everybody's still, alive. Your house hasn't been burned to the ground. No drone is over your house about to launch a bomb to destroy your house, right? Nobody broke in to steal anything. Everything is still there. You wake up. You ever wake up in the middle of the night and just go around? At least you should as a man anyway, right? You wake up in the middle of the night and you go double check the door to make sure the door is locked. Check on your family, look in your children's room to make sure everybody is okay. And then you can kind of go back to sleep, right? With your hand under the gun, under the pillow, right? But the point that I'm making is that the Prophet ﷺ said, whoever from amongst you wakes up and is safe and sound in his family and his property, mu'afan fi jasadihi, finds that his body is still intact, everything still works. You open your eyes, you can walk, you can talk, right? وَعِنْدَهُ قُوتَ يَوْمِهِ, and he has his sustenance for today, not tomorrow, not next week. We worrying about stuff. We have a luxury to worry about things that people in other countries can't even fathom. We have a luxury. We worrying about what college my son going to go to. Is he going to go to my alma mater? Is he going to get, picked by another college? I really want him to go to the college that I went to. I want him to graduate, this. I want him to, right? We have luxuries to worry about things that people in other countries. You think a father in Syria right now is worrying about what college his son or daughter is going to go to? You think a father in Yemen right now is worrying about what school his daughter is going to go to? These people are trying to survive. And we have a luxury to worry about things that people in other countries can't even fathom. They can't even think about right now. First world problems, right? First world problems. He said, but whoever from amongst you wakes up safe and sound in his family and his property, finds that his body is still, safe, secure, intact, and he has his sustenance for today. فَكَأَنَّمَا حِيزَتْ لَهُ الدُّنْيَا is as if he has been given the world and everything in it. See, we chase big happinesses and mince out on small joys. We're looking for the big happiness, and as a result of that, we miss out on the small joys of life. Small joys of life. I remember working at a halfway house, right, as a clinical counselor. And I told the inmates one day, I said to them, you know what's gangster? I said, being behind bars is not gangster. What's gangster is coming home from work and opening the door and have your children rush you at the door. Abby, Daddy, right? That's gangster. To come in and your wife is, your meal is prepared. Honey, go wash your hands. Food is done. Alhamdulillah. That's gangster. You know what's gangster? Coming home, right? And your wife is sitting on the couch reciting Quran to your children. And you just tiptoe in. You can hear them in the living room, talking about, a surah from the Quran, one of the stories of the prophets. And you just kind of peek your head in, right? That's gangster. Going to sleep in a cell with another man on top of you, right? There's nothing gangster about that. There's nothing gangster about that. Having your wall surrounded with pornographic pictures, right? There's nothing gangster about that. Cuddling next to your wife, reciting Ayatul Kursi before you go to sleep, that's gangster. That's gangster. And just brings a whole new reality to their perspective on what gangster is about. So here again, playing around with the words and how we interpret things. It's very important for us to interpret things like this. So the Prophet ﷺ is giving us a new way to interpret, happiness. Happiness is not in having, luxury home and, everybody wants that. We started off in Jannah. We started off in Jannah. The Prophet Adam alayhi salam was created in Jannah, told to live in Jannah. So where do you think our love for nice things, where does that come from? That's part of our DNA. Adam lived in Jannah for a period of time. You don't think that was passed down to his children? Absolutely. There's none from amongst us except that they like nice things. There's nothing wrong with that. However, we have to put those things in perspective. But he said it's as if كَأَنَّمَا حِيزَتْ لَهُ الدُّنْيَا is as if he has been given the world and everything in it. Stop chasing big happinesses and settle for the small joys of life that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given you. You never know how important having two arms is until you see someone who don't have no arms. Then you value that. You see that and you say, subhanallah, I'm grateful that I got my arms. I'm grateful that my, these body parts are functioning. However, the one who suffers from anxiety, they can't fathom this because they're too busy worrying about tomorrow. Right? There are some, as I said before, who don't have the luxury to worry about the things that, we sit and worry about. I'm going to leave with an incident that happened during the time of the Prophet ﷺ, where someone had to choose the love of themselves and their happiness over somebody else's. As I said before, you don't need anybody's permission to be happy. I don't need your permission or anybody else's permission to be happy. That's a God-given right that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gave every single one of us. Allah gave us the choice to choose to either be in paradise or the hellfire. You have a choice. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in the Quran, فَمَنْ شَاءَ فَلْيُؤْمِنْ وَمَنْ شَاءَ فَلْيَكْفُرْ. Whoever from amongst you wants to believe, then let him believe. And whoever wants to disbelieve, then let him disbelieve. مَنْ عَمِلَ صَالِحًا فَلِنَفْسِهِ وَمَنْ أَسَاءَ فَعَلَيْهَا. Allah says that whoever does righteous deeds is for the benefit of his own soul, and whoever does evil deeds is to the detriment of his own soul. It's your choice. Allah says in the Quran, وَكُلُّ إِنسَانٍ أَلْزَمْنَاهُ طَائِرَهُ فِي عُنُقِهِ. And every human being, we have fastened his fate to his own neck. فَرِيقٌ فِي الْجَنَّةِ وَفَرِيقٌ فِي السَّعِيرِ. A party going to Jannah, a party going to the hellfire. Your choice. If Allah has given you choice, the ability to choose where you go in the hereafter, whether eternal damnation or eternal misery or eternal bliss, then how could you not believe that Allah has given you a choice to choose whether to be miserable or happy in this life? You have a choice. If you're not happy, fix it. Because the only one that can fix it is you. The only one that can fix your happiness is you. If you're not happy, don't say, oh, I'm not happy, then fix it. That's the only advice that I can have for someone that's not happy. Because the only person that can fix that is you. Kullu insanin tabibu nafsi. Every human being is his own doctor. You know what your ills are, and you know what the cure is. Sometimes we go to people for advice simply because we're looking for permission to be happy. You don't need somebody's permission to be happy. Brother Imam, and you're just looking at this person like, you asking me for permission to be happy? You don't need my permission. If being in this situation is making you miserable, then only you can fix that. I can't. You don't need my permission to be happy. This is your choice. If you choose to stay in this situation, then that's totally up to you. That's totally up to you. Imam an-Nasa'i, rahimahullah ta'ala, he mentioned a narration on the authority of Abdullah bin Abbas, radiyallahu ta'ala anhuma. أن زوج بريرة كان عبدا يقال له مغيث ابن جحش وكأني أنظر إليه يطوف خلفها يبكي ودموعه تسيل على لحيته فقال النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم يا عباس ألا تعجب من حب مغيث بريرة ومن بغض بريرة مغيثة. Ibn Abbas radiallahu ta'ala anhuma, he narrated that the husband of a woman by the name of Barira was a slave woman who eventually, she was very close with Aisha. And Barira purchased her freedom. She borrowed the money from Aisha. She asked Aisha if she could borrow the money from the Prophet ﷺ to purchase her freedom. But Barira was married. She was married to a man by the name of Mughith ibn Jahsh. And the Prophet ﷺ was talking to his uncle Abbas. He said, كَأَنِّي أَنظُرَ إِلَيْهِ, is as if I could see Mughith chasing behind Barira. وَدُمُوعُهُ تَسِيلُ عَلَى لِحْيَتِهِ, while his tears was soaking up his beard, right? Crying, begging his wife not to leave him. Chasing behind. This is happening in public, right? This is happening in public. She's chasing behind him, begging her not to leave her. Right? This is a man. It's usually the opposite way, right? This is a man chasing behind his wife, begging her not to leave him, crying in front of the whole community, right? And the Prophet ﷺ turned to his uncle Abbas. He said, "Oh Abbas, aren't you amazed at the love of Mughith for Barira and the displeasure or the dislike of Barira for Mughith? He loves her, but she's not in love with him." It happens. But sometimes we allow that dynamic to pull us back into a situation, right? But I love you. Okay. So now if I decide that, I still, despite the fact that you love me, I still don't want to be with you, right? Now I'm a demon. No, I just choose me. I just choose me. And I don't need your permission for that. And I don't owe you an explanation for that. I don't. It's cold, but that's what human love is. Human love is cold. When you understand that your love of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala supersedes every other love, it makes you appear cold. But we haven't grasped these concepts because most of our understanding of love is from, these European, understandings and fabricated stories about love, right? All of these stories and, the Shakespeare and all of that comes from this European understanding of love. Instead of understanding love through the lens of our religion, through the lens of spirituality, that God comes first. God comes first. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala comes first. And Allah's love supersedes every other love. Period. And you will come off cold in an environment where we function with unconditional love. Jesus loves everybody. Nah, la wallahi. Jesus doesn't love everybody. All right? The Prophet ﷺ says, Salamun ala man ittaba'a al-huda. Peace be upon those who follow right guidance. Yeah. Peace on those who follow right guidance. Absolutely. So this whole Jesus loves, God loves, and, this unconditional, right, interpretation of love, right? And then when someone kills, one of your relatives and they asked you to pardon them. No, I'm not going to pardon you, right? Where's the love at, right? So yeah, there is conditions to love. Don't ever think something's so beautiful that in certain circumstances it won't look ugly. Don't ever think something is so beautiful that in certain circumstances it won't look ugly. There's nothing unconditional in our deen. Unconditional love is only for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. No matter what Allah does to us, no matter how Allah tests us, we still love Him. That's unconditional love. That's unconditional love only for God subhanahu wa ta'ala. As one of the Salaf, he said, لو أدخلني النار لأخبرت أهل النار أني أحبه. That even if Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala put me in the hellfire, I would tell everybody in the hellfire I love Him. That's unconditional love. No matter how Allah tests me, right? Even if I don't understand it, it does not change my thoughts about Him subhanahu wa ta'ala. That's unconditional love. And that's only for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So, understanding, helping us to reconstruct this understanding of love that we have, But the Prophet ﷺ said, Ya Abbas, ala ta'jab min hubbi mughith barira wa bughdi barira mughitha. Aren't you amazed at how much Mughith loves Barira, but how much that Barira hates Mughith? So, فَقَالَ نَهَا النَّبِيُّ صَلَّى اللَّهُ عَلَيْهِ وَسَلَّمْ لَوْ رَجَعْتِهِ. So the Prophet ﷺ said to Barira, just go back to him. Go back to him. He's the father. فَإِنَّهُ أَبُو وَلَدِكَ. He is the father of your children. He's the father of your son. Go back to him. And Barira said to the Prophet ﷺ, أَتَأْمُرُنِي يَا رَسُولَ اللَّهِ. She said, "Oh Messenger of Allah, are you commanding me to go back to him? Or do I have a choice?" Listen, here we're talking about a choice. We're talking about a choice here, which is what I led with from the very beginning. You always have a choice. Anyone right now who is miserable is because you chose to be miserable. Anyone right now that's happy is because you chose to be happy. Despite everything, despite the odds that were against you, you still chose to be happy. Whatever decision that you made to be happy, you made that decision. Despite the fact that other people disagreed with you, you were bold enough to make that decision and choose what you believe is happy for you, and you deserve to be happy. It's a privilege. Happiness is a privilege for those bold souls who are willing to make the choice between their happiness and someone else, and they choose me. I choose me. Every time, I will choose me. You will always find yourself disappointed with me because I'm going to always choose my happiness. Nobody else's happiness is more important than my own. Nobody's. That's not even part of our religion, right? When you make dua, right? Who do you start off making dua for first? You start with yourself first. You say, "Oh Allah, forgive me and forgive you. Taqabbal Allah minna wa minkum." We say, like when you make Hajj, you make Umrah, right? We say, "Taqabbal Allah minna wa minkum." May Allah accept from me and from you, right? We start with ourselves first. That's part of our deen, right? You don't ever start with somebody else's happiness first. If there's a spot in the first rank in the masjid that is open, you don't tell a brother, go ahead. No, you take the first spot. You don't give that to somebody else. You don't give your hasanat away to somebody else. There's an element of competition here. There's an element of competition in our religion, which if there's competition, then obviously you always want to come in first, right? When the Prophet ﷺ said that there are 8 gates to Jannah, right? And each gate to Jannah represents a particular deed. So Abu Bakr asked the Prophet ﷺ, is it possible that a man could enter through all of the 8 gates of Jannah? I'm not just trying to go through one gate to Jannah. How about I enter through any 8 gate that I want, any of the 8 gates that I desire? And the Prophet ﷺ said, Na'am ya Abu Bakr, wa arju an takunna minhum. Yes, it is possible that a person can enter through Jannah, through all of the 8 gates, and I hope that you will be from amongst them, Abu Bakr. Absolutely. There's an element of competition here, and we're talking about, securing a place for yourself. Yawm al-Qiyamah, you're going to ask your children, was I not a good father to you? Then give me some of your hasanat. You're going to ask your spouse, was I not a good husband to you? Give me some of your hasanat. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in the Quran, يَوْمَ يَفِرُّ مَرْءُ مِنْ أَخِيهِ وَأُمِّهِ وَأَبِيهِ وَصَاحِبَتِهِ وَبَنِيهِ. On a day when a man will run from his mother and his own father. وَأُمِّهِ وَأَبِيهِ وَصَاحِبَتِهِ وَبَنِيهِ. Will run away from his wife and his children. كُلِّ امْرِئٍ يَوْمَئِذٍ شَأْنُ يُغْنِي. Every human being on that day will have enough concern about his own self to be worried about somebody else. There's an element of selfishness here. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said, وَسَارِعُوا إِلَى مَغْفِرَةٍ مِّن رَبِّكُمْ وَجَنَّةٍ وَأَرْضُهَا السَّمَاوَاتِ وَالْأَرْضُ أُعِدَّتْ لِلْمُتَّقِينَ. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said, and race with one another to the forgiveness of your Lord. There's an element of competition here. سَارِعُوا. Race with one another to the forgiveness of your Lord, and a Jannah whose width is the width of the heavens and the earth, prepared for those who fear Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So there's a level of element of competition here. You don't give your hasanat away to nobody else. When we make dua, we start with ourselves first. Oh Allah, forgive me and forgive my wife. Oh Allah, forgive me and forgive my family. You don't begin with someone else first. All right? Which means that your happiness comes before anybody else's, man. Don't ever let anyone make you feel like their happiness is more important to you than your own. This is the ultimate mind freak. To let somebody make you think that their happiness should be more important to you than your own. This is the ultimate mind freak. That, wait a minute, let me get this right. So you being happy should be more important to me than my own happiness? You have got to be kidding me. And some men pull it off, and some women pull it off. Which is why some people remain dead in relationships, dead in marriages for 10, 15 years. You in a dead end marriage. A marriage ain't going nowhere. Because you let somebody pull the ultimate on you into making you think that their happiness is more important to you than yours. So you're supposed to commit yourself to a lifetime of misery, right? Of misery. Just so somebody else can be happy. I'm sorry. You got the right idea, the wrong person. I'm not your dude. I'm not your guy. You have the right idea, the wrong person. I'm sorry. I'm just, as they say, I'm just keeping it 100. This is straight talk. Straight talk. I don't cut no corners, man. It is what it is. Life is a rough place, man. You know what I mean? But you got to secure your own happiness, man, because what good are you if you're not happy? What good are you to anybody? You're not even good to your own self. What good are you miserable? You're not good to anybody. So the Prophet ﷺ said to Barira, Lo raja'tihi. He said, why don't you just go back to him? The Prophet's trying to, he's looking at this man in public, you humiliating himself, right, in public. And he says to the woman, just go back to him, right? As some imams give the same advice, just be patient, sister, right? That generic, be patient advice. And she said to the Prophet ﷺ, Ta'muruni, are you commanding me? Meaning, do I have a choice? And the Prophet ﷺ said, La, innama ana shafir. He said, no, I'm not commanding you. I'm just trying to intercede on behalf of this poor man. And she said, Fala hajata li fihi. I have no desire for him. She chose her. How can you be mad at her? She chose her. Nobody will know why she made that choice. But if you were to understand everything that I did, you would be me. You're not supposed to understand everything I do or understand everything I say. Right? I get jammed up like that so much. Brother Shadid said this, he said that. You're not supposed to understand everything that I say. If you understood everything I said, you would be me. I'm speaking from my own reference points. You got to go back and you got to rewind the tape of my life and push play starting way back when in order to, and speed it up in order for you to understand why I say the things I say in the way that I say it. You will never understand that, which is why I am who I am and you are who you are. If you want further clarification, then just ask me. But I'm amazed at a person who listens to something that I say or anybody else's say and then run back and try to reinterpret it. Oh, he said this and this is what he meant. It's like, I'm alive. Just come ask me. How you going to reinterpret my words? Like, I'm right here. I'm right here. Just ask me what I meant by that. Don't you create a whole 30-minute, YouTube clip on what I said and you're going to dissect my words and what I meant by it. It's like you're sitting here like shaking my head. Like, how do you explain what I said and what I meant by what I said? And I'm standing right here. It's amazing. And people buy into that stuff. Oh, he only said that because this, that, and the brother, mashallah, he gave clarification. How's somebody else giving clarification on my words? Anyway, so after Barira spent her entire life as a slave, once she secured her own freedom, she chose her. And she didn't allow the advice of the Prophet ﷺ, nor the cries of her husband, nor the awe of the community. Mind you, this happened in public. So despite everything, she still chose her. That's a strong woman. Despite the advice of the Prophet, most of us, if the Prophet had advised us to just go back, we'd have just blindly taken the advice of the Prophet ﷺ. She asked the Prophet ﷺ, "Atamuruni, are you commanding me?" Meaning, is this a commandment or do I have a choice in the matter? Because if I have a choice, then I choose me. And that's what she did. She chose her. So understand, happiness, and happiness is not contingent on anybody else but yourself and your relationship with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. You don't owe anybody an excuse for being happy. You don't need anybody's permission to be happy. This is something that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gave you, and we use what we have in our religion to help us navigate through the choices that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given us. Understand love. That the love of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala supersedes all other. There's a healthy love and there's an unhealthy love. That healthy love is when you know Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, you know your Lord, you're connected to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and you put Allah's love before anything else. That's a healthy understanding of love. And then you have this interpretation of love where, we love everybody unconditionally, right? We have, all these people sharing the same space in our heart, and we find ourselves on this emotional roller coaster, right? You can't have too many people occupying your heart. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said, وَمَا جَعَلَ اللَّهُ لِرَجُلٍ قَلْبَيْنِ فِي جَوْفِهِ. And Allah has not made for any one man two hearts. You have one heart, and that heart can only withstand but so much. All right. And if you let everybody into that heart, you're going to find yourself being torn 100 different ways at one time. But when you let Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala navigate your heart, then you can decide who you allow in and who you don't allow in. And those who you do allow in, how far you allow them in. This thing is, systematic. It's not just, I'm here, I got love for everybody. Nah, the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam loved his companions. He loved Abu Bakr radiallahu anhu. He was asked, "Man ahabba an-nas ilayk?" Who is the most beloved person to you? He said, "From the men or from the women?" They said, "From the men." He said, "Abu Bakr." They said, "From the women?" He said, "His daughter." He loved Abu Bakr, but along with that, he said that if I was going to take anybody to be an intimate friend, I would have taken Abu Bakr as an intimate friend. But Allah had already chosen me to be an intimate friend, just like He took Ibrahim as an intimate friend. So I suffice myself with the brotherhood of Islam and my love for him as my brother in Islam. But on that level of intimacy, only Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala occupies that space. And this is what I wanted to present, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala knows best. Wa sallallahu ala nabiyyina Muhammad wa ala alihi wa sahbihi wa sallama tasliman kathira wa akhiru da'wana anil hamdulillahi rabbil alameen. I'll open the chat for some questions, inshallah ta'ala. Please keep the questions related to the topic, bi'idhnillah.